A very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. I am thrilled to have the pleasure to introduce this session to you, which is all about elevating your workplace learning. And thrilled to have three amazing speakers and experts in this field. I warmly welcome Barbara Covarrubias-Venegas.
Hello there.
Lovely to have you, Barbara. Thank you for joining. And also wonderful to have Melanie Martinelli also joining us.
Hello.
Hi, Melanie. Lovely to have you. And Megla Al-Haq joining us.
Hello,
And
everyone.
hi, Megla. Lovely to have you all here. And so let me do a little introduction to the topic and why we're doing this. So these three phenomenal women are all experts in the field of learning transfer and have a lot of experience working with organizations on how do we learn, how do we foster the learning culture. And why I find this is such a valuable topic is that I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Pari Namazi. I always forget to introduce myself. And I'm the managing partner at UNEPA. And part of my role is also working with clients and fostering that learning culture. I'm a global team and executive coach, but also we work in the space of leadership development and organizational development. And so, again, being here with these wonderful experts is tapping into their expertise and knowledge. So from my side, what I see a lot in our clients is that the questions that they always ask is, we know a learning culture is important. To become more innovative in this fast-paced VUCA world, we know we have to learn and learn fast. But what is the right balance over there? How do we get people to learn? How do we make sure we're actually applying that learning? What are we seeing in terms of learning transfer? How do we see behavior change? And then what are the best strategies out there? How do we keep people engaged? These are the questions that I have heard over and over, and this is why I'm so happy to have Barbara, Melanie, and Megla with us, because you're going to be discussing some of these topics. And please feel free, if you'd like to write your comment, your question in the chat box, please do that. We'll try to address them. If we don't, we will make sure we address it in a later stage to you. So I'm going to hand over to each of our speakers to introduce themselves. I'd like to start with you, Barbara. So Barbara, I know you have the Virtual Space Hero. I know you have a lot of learning experience. Could you just give a short introduction to yourself and maybe talk about shortly, what are some of the trends or the challenges you're seeing in the learning and development space? So hand over to Barbara.
Thanks so much, Pari. Indeed, my journey into the learning space started around 20-something years ago when I started teaching at the university, and I did a trainer certification program, so I felt like really empowered to be able to teach in an effective way. But honestly, if I look back what I was doing 20 years ago to what I'm doing today, I really see there's a huge difference. In particular, in the past years, there were professionals that I was exchanging with, programs that I got certified in that helped me to become a better learning professional, and also feeling much more happy with my job, honestly. Because what is the worst thing ever? It's like, if you know that people are coming to your training, they might not be motivated, they are like slightly engaged or disengaged during the training, and afterwards you know that things are going to sort of fade away. For me, that was the most unhappy moments that I ever lived. And so in the past years, when I was able to work more with concept like high performance learning journeys, with learning transfer design elements in my trainings, that Melanie will for sure talk about a little bit later, because she's my heroine in that space with Ina Weinbauer-Heidel together. So I think the moment that I was able to be better at designing trainings and conducting trainings, my work got more effective for my participants, and I was also much more satisfied with the outcome. I think the biggest challenge nowadays, talking about virtual learning, is to really be also self-motivated learner when you are on an online learning journey alone and it's all asynchronous. That's for me the big challenge nowadays.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll come back to some of the points that you picked up. I especially when you talk about the virtual space, because I'll come back to that as a question, especially after COVID. Is that still very predominant, or are we looking at more in-person training? I'll come to that question later. But right now, I'd love to introduce Melanie. And Melanie, really lovely to have you here because I too have known Melanie for so many years and met you in many different contexts. And I really appreciate very much the work that you do in this field as an expert, but also as a practitioner. And to me, a very giving, a very generous, a very knowledgeable person. So Melanie is the founder of Going Beyond Training. Melanie, why don't you do a little introduction of yourself, your journey, and maybe shortly, what are you seeing as the key trends or challenges in the learning space?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Pari. So my journey, actually similar to Barbara, goes back about 20 years, also linked to the university work I was doing that brought me to India, where I did research on the impact of culture in outsourcing project that kind of led to the conclusion that cross-cultural training might be a way to make these offshore projects, more sticky. However, having a finance background, as we started rolling out trainings, my first question was always, so what? Like, is this training really having the impact we want? And so I very quickly started specializing in training evaluation, using the Kirkpatrick model, looking at impact studies. And one thing that I realized, and actually, by the way, it's still one of the challenge I see today to answer that question. Unfortunately, a lot of training is not having the desired impact. It's not like we're spending a lot of money on training, but very few people are actually applying. And so
Mm,
that's really kind of then where my journey took me, kind of trying to dig deeper into what is really required to get the desired outcome. And that's when I started working closer with, Dr. Ina Weinbauer-Heidel from the Institute of Transfer Effectiveness and also others in this field, just really trying to understand what's really required, not just to have a great learning experience, but really make that transfer happen.
mhm,
And so, coming to your question about, what I see as some challenges, I would absolutely agree with the one that Barbara shared. Another one, especially linked to transfer, is scalability. I see a lot of clients, nowadays, if I compare with 10 years ago, a lot of companies are actively thinking about transfer, but a big challenge is, well, it requires resources. And so, how do you really make this happen? Good news, and
mm,
we can maybe explore that a little bit. Technology can help as well. There are
mhm,
technologies out there that can make this more scalable. But I think that's a big challenge I see in a lot of our clients. They want to do
mm.
transfer, but they just don't, yeah, the scalability aspect.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Thank you, Melanie. Let's see if we can pull that in somehow
Hmm.
in the discussions. And last but not least, I'd like to hand over to Megla. And Megla is our learning in UNEPA is the learning specialist and has been handling a lot of our work with clients in developing and designing learning tools and journeys and looking at the effectiveness of that. So I'll hand over to Megla to do her introduction. What brought you on this journey, Megla? And maybe you sharing your experience and what are you seeing in terms of challenges and trends in the L&D space?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, as Pari mentioned, in my work with UNEPA, we help companies, we support them, and we work with an approach of co-creation, but we try to come up with L&D solutions for them. And my work is making sure that the learning programs that are designed are impactful, that they are scalable. So all these things that Melanie and Barbara were talking about, we see how we can apply that. What some of the challenges we've noticed with many of the clients, you could have a beautiful learning program designed. You can have a wonderful, sophisticated learning platform, but how do you make sure that this learning and engagement is consistent? And the other thing is the challenge mainly that most employees have is that they just do not have enough time. So
Mm,
even if there is a push from the organization, yes, they encourage everyone to learn, but because of the daily pressures of work and other priorities, business priorities, learning sort of
Mm.
falls off. So this is one of the main challenges, how to make sure that learning becomes part of their everyday work role.
Yeah. So true. I often hear it with our clients. We keep talking about how do you make this the fabric of our DNA, this learning culture, and it's, we say it sounds very easy, but it's really not. And maybe I'm going to go to this next stage where I'm going to throw questions at you, and if you don't mind, I'll give the question to each person. But please, if you feel you'd like to add anything, do that. So how this will run is I'll give you the question to the person, and then see if anyone else wants to add. But also, if your questions from the audience are coming up, we'll try to pull that in and weave that into our discussion as well. Megla, maybe starting with you, because you talked a little bit about the time issue. Let's put that out as the challenge. What, in your opinion, how can we cultivate this environment that you can really have continuous professional development and lifelong learning, especially when you talk about organizations where they come back and they say we don't have time, our staff are traveling all the time, so we have limited resources. What would you suggest?
So yeah, it's a very wide question. I mean, first off, there is no one size fits all. At UNEPA, we have learned this, that we take every client individually. We have to create tailored solutions for them. The first, I think, thing is to understand what kind of if the three things are there in order to create a learning culture. Is there the right mindset there, the structure, and do they have the right environment? And when I say structure and environment, here comes this whole issue about resources and time. And so that has to be weighed in. One of the first steps we do is we try to understand what is the level of their organizational learning maturity. Do they have informal learning structures? Are there more formal structures in place? What is it that we can build on so that we can take them to the ideal stage, which is an embedded learning environment? So, I mean, there are some key components that we put in our approach. And our approach, by the way, our learning strategy is our model is called the RAISE model. And I will talk about this later in more detail, but the RAISE model basically looks at making the learning actionable. How can we have this transfer of the learning so that the learning becomes something that they share, something that they can apply, and something they can teach others? And that's where the real that you can measure that the learning has been effective.
Yeah. Were you going to say?
Okay. Sorry, just as the last 2 points. In order to have a learning culture, I think I could mention 20 things, but perhaps 2 or 3 of them. Leadership commitment. So if learning has become a core value of the organization and the leadership is on board, then that is a huge plus. Then learning can be rolled out. And then the right evaluation and measuring components are in there to measure the learning and the progress, constantly iterating what is needed, and take out what is not, making sure that it's relevant. And then the third thing is trying to integrate learning into their everyday workflow. So what kind of solutions can be put into place where learning becomes part of the work week? It's something that I mentioned before. I'll stop here for
Thank you. No, really valuable tips. And I love that you start by saying it's not a one size fits all. And I think that's what's so beautiful in how you craft learning journeys for an organization, really understanding where they are on their journey, what the mindset is, and what the stomach is for learning. And so thank you, Megla. I'd love to pull Melanie to pull you in.
Can I, Pari, by the way, can I just add a
Yeah.
thought on what Megla shared? Because, we speak about learning culture, and I know I'm, of course, a little bit biased here because of my work that very much focuses on transfer. And I sometimes wish we would actually call it transfer culture, not only learning culture, because I do think just even the way we speak about it sends a message that we are creating a learning culture. So what's important to us is learning. Whereas if we speak about a transfer culture, is what we are looking at is application. And just to give you a couple of quick thoughts, I've never really come across an organization that tells me that transfer is not important. They all say it is. However, the actions they take very often send a different signal. Give you a very simple example that I'm sure you've all come across, and I'm guilty as well. Have you ever received a certificate of attendance for a learning event? Yes, probably, and I've also handed them out. But what does that, as a message send? It sends a message. What's important is that you attend the learning event.
Yeah.
Whereas, for example, the certificate of completion of a project, a certificate of applying the learning sends a very different message. Very often I see organizations making learning training events compulsory, but then the transfer tools are voluntary. Again, what are you sending as a message? You're sending the message, learning is important. Attend the session. What happens afterwards isn't. And so I think that also, to build on Megla, goes into those systems, into this entire culture that we are creating, not just what we are saying is important, but what are our actions actually signaling to the rest in the organization.
Yeah, Melanie, lovely, lovely points. Thank you for that. I mean, it's taking the focus off that, that moment, and it's really looking at what are we doing with it, which I think is the critical thing. And I know that's why so many learning interventions have failed, because we've been looking at the end of the day, we want to see the application, but somehow the focus is on the front side. And maybe coming back to you, I'd love to pick your brain a little bit, and what happens, how do we get leaders more involved in it? How do we secure support and commitment? Because what I've always seen is that if they role model it, if you get that commitment from senior leadership, it sticks longer. What do you see? Who really should be owning this and role modeling it?
I mean, I think there's two things that go through my mind is when we kind of say, we got to get support from the business. I think on the one hand, we have the senior business leaders, and we also have to, we know from transfer, a very important role play the direct supervisor. So we also need to get them on board. I think, with the senior leaders, it's really if you're offering a solution to a mission critical program, a mission critical situation, like a program that you're rolling out that really supports the business mission, I don't see a challenge in actually getting that support. I think the challenge is, unfortunately, and sorry if I might step on someone's foot, I think, unfortunately, a lot of L&D departments are turning out way too many trainings just for the sake of training, because we are still looking at numbers of how many trainings, how many people are we reaching, how many programs, but a lot of those programs are not really mission critical. They are sometimes, just the other day with Dina, I talked about this. They are also so-called hype-based training. There's some trendy topic that everyone talks about. Okay, let's offer a training for it. But maybe the people don't even need it, and the business couldn't care less. So I think if you are sitting on the table with the business, you'll know what the focus, the priorities of the business are, and your solutions are addressing the challenges the business is facing, you will get that support.
Yeah.
But that means you got to work with, when the requests and need comes from the business. With the supervisors, I think it's also understandable. I mean, anyone who's been in a supervisor role knows it's sometimes a pretty shitty position to be in. You get pressure from the top, you get requests from below, and then L&D comes as well, tells you, well, you need to do all of this to make transfer happen. And I think there's an opportunity for us in L&D to say, what can we do for them? How can we make that easy for them? What templates can we give them? What, even if it's just a quick summary, about what gets covered in a training, along with maybe 2-3 coaching questions that they can use when the participants come back from the training, making it easy for them so it doesn't feel like another burden on top. Because I think it's not that they don't want to support. Very often there's a fear. I don't know what's expected of me. There's a lack of clarity, and there's no time. So we just got to make it easier.
Very nice. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for that.
And Pari, may I just add something here also what Melanie was saying? I think if we want the key decision makers to be involved or to get involved on a topic, to sponsor a topic, it's like when I talk about diversity, right? they need to be measured by diversity, whatever KPI it is. And the same goes for transfer. So if I want to be an inclusive organization, I need to have metrics about that. I need to have diversity metrics. And the same goes for transfer. Of course, somebody will tell you, well, what do? We have then 1,000 metrics. No, that's not true, because many of those things, they are interdependent.
Yeah.
But you need to measure them. And I think this is important. And just to also reiterate what Melanie was saying, I think, and also here, Elizabeth, I see that she commented it on well. The focus is different as well when we use and apply the best fitting words and terminology. Exactly, that's it. So I think this is like one of the things that we need to make sure that our wording fits the organization wordings, and not only the HR organizational wordings, but the people's wording of the organization.
Yeah.
Very good point. Very, very good point. Barbara, coming back to you, we talk about I hear this a lot about engagement and motivation. So usually organizations will keep asking, so how do we make sure that they're engaged? How do we make sure they're motivated? I definitely agree that, are we giving the learners what they need to learn? Or is it being pushed by the organization? But as we have so much more virtual settings for learning, how do you keep people motivated and engaged? What are some of the techniques and tricks and tips that you would use?
Thanks so much, Pari, for this question. It perfectly fits into what Jules is also commenting here in the chat. Apart from managing expectations, setting the ground rules, how do you keep control when people are busy? They switch off the camera and they put "be right back" in the chat box and clearly keep doing their emails. Extremely rude. Jules, thank you so much for this question, because exactly that is what Pari also intended to ask you. So I would say for me, there are 4 big pillars on how to create engagement before, during, and after the session. And for 3 pillars are coming out of the learning design angle, to say so. It is the learning design of the training itself, because you can do a lot before on how you involve people before a training already, if possible, so that the interest rises. That's one thing. The second thing is, of course, the individual itself, on how you get them involved, as one of the examples that I was giving now, but also how you get them involved, for example, doing interviews beforehand and able to tailor the content to their needs. The third one is the organization, because also the organization, the direct managers, the HR department can do a lot of things so that people know it's exclusive to be in the training. It's not just a thing that I can sign up because I have a budget of 2,000 euro every year that I can use in whatever training, but I need to make clear as an organization why this training is important, why we care about you learning this stuff, and also the manager needs to focus on that. These are also the 3 pillars that, if we look at learning transfer, also in the book from Ina, these are the 3 pillars that we know about, where we can support the transfer with. And for me, the 4th pillar still is the trainer itself, trainer personality, whether introvert, extrovert, it doesn't matter, because we do see that there are a lot of introverts being fantastic online trainers, but you need to be aware about what is your online trainer personality in order to create a safe space where people have valuable conversations and they also have some fun, because we do know that fun is important. And those are for me the 4 most important things. And what Jules here is asking about people switching off the camera, I would say that that has to do, on one hand, on setting clear roles, but also on the other hand, on being an engaging trainer personality, so that people want to be there and contribute. I always let people, from an inclusion point of view, I always let people switch off the camera, because sometimes they don't feel well. Sometimes they are in a room wherever they don't feel comfortable sharing what is behind them. The blurry background doesn't work, whatever. There are reasons why people don't want to be on camera, and I like to respect them. But the moment that I started training, I make clear that it would be fantastic if everybody could be on camera, because it helps to create an environment. Because who wants to share anything more personal if there are just black spots in the whole Zoom room or whatever room it is? But I create that environment by making clear what my expectations would be, but I give them the space as well to switch off the camera.
Yeah.
Depending on the context, I really tell them, if you are not able, and that helps, in my case it helps, if you're not able to have the camera on, please write me a private message to let me know why. That's a little bit, I usually use that in student context, to be very honest, because
Yeah,
they
I
have
kind
really,
of
that's something.
think that might not work for all contexts. Yes.
But in the
But
student context, it works.
yeah, but Barbara, lovely that you said that. And this is a question to everyone. I'd love to throw this out at you. It's a little. I found I was at a conference just a few days ago, and when we were having discussions on learning, one of the comments was, "Well, the next phase is going to be we're going to be moving into avatars." And we will have an avatar for the trainer. We'll have the room and the individuals participating. Their avatars will be there. I mean, how does that resonate with you? How are you seeing this whole trend with AI emerging? What do you think is going to happen? That's to anyone.
Like, I'm
So
gonna go ahead, Mekla, because I
no,
have,
please. I'll go
I
after
have,
you.
like, for me, it's just very clear. It's like, just like with any new fancy technology, for me, it's just, again, the conversation is too focused on, what impact might this have on learning? It's not going to solve your transfer challenge, though. I mean, yes, you can use all kinds of technology to make your learning experience more immersive, more engaging. But if that's all you focus on, the training event again, and you're not leveraging some of that for after as well in transfer, you're going to be with the same problem. Because I think, with the engagement that Barbara was also talking about, I think one of the big challenge, is not just how can you keep them engaged in the session. I think more important is asking ourselves, how do we keep them engaged afterwards? Afterwards, because when they go back into the actual learning and into the work environment, how can we there keep them engaged? And there as well, you see so many technologies. But one of the big challenge with a lot of technology is if the learners are not already using that technology on a day-to-day basis, and they're actually spending time on that technology, you're having a massive barrier, because the person needs to form a new habit of going onto that platform every day to
Yeah.
actually kind of, make transfer happen. So I think there it's really about asking ourselves, how can we go to the learners? Is there technology out there that actually meets the learners where they are when they are at work, so that we can support them in applying what they've learned? Because I think it's not just about cameras on in an actual session. It's really about also, how do you keep them engaged afterwards? And I
Beautiful
haven't
that you
really
said.
seen a lot about AI there. I hear a lot about AI, how it can help us with content
Yeah.
development and other
Yeah.
things. I mean, there's some stuff there. I know there's a person, Emma Weber, who has a chatbot that can be used in coaching afterwards. So transfer coaching. So I think there's some things that are getting used there. But curious to see what that will bring even more to us.
Thank you. Megla, I know you wanted to add something. I'm just pulling in Jules's comment saying, I'd like to think I'm more interesting and engaging than an avatar. Surely you are, Jules. And I hope none of us become avatars. Megla, you wanted to add something, please.
Yeah, actually, thank you for picking on what Jules said. It's very true. I mean, the avatar, if we all start using that, let's see how much momentum it actually gathers. But I keep remembering when Meta was first introduced, and there was that weird conference with with the Facebook team having a meeting, and it just looked really odd. But if it becomes the norm, I think it'll make learning fun. But I think that it only and which is very important. Learning should have fun elements to it. There are gamification features. We use it on our online platform, Raise Learning. But going back to what Melanie said, it really is what happens after. It really is, how do you actually transfer? I can give you a couple of examples where transfer can happen, and we've seen it with our own experience. Where you have managers and team leaders doing 15-minute learning sprints before or after a team meeting. And these are very effective because it also allows the introverts to showcase what they know. And they're more likely to speak up in a closed team And that's when the manager can actually measure, oh yeah, great, we've introduced and focused on this required learning. Everyone seems to be on board. So it's a very quick feedback cycle. And then the other one is to have learning buddies. A lot of team members, what we've noticed from our experience is they team together and they learn together. This sometimes really helps with the transfer of knowledge. So there are little things you can do. Some companies also have role playing academies. Like I'm thinking of Cisco, and then they had like this networking academy. So they actually had to do simulation, and that really tested the knowledge transfer. So and I read about it, that how successful it was. So anyway, there are many great ideas out there of how to engage.
I am aware that we only have 10 minutes and I have so many more questions for you guys. So let me focus on maybe some of the key ones as we're closing gradually. Barbara, I wonder if you talked a little bit about metrics. I'd love to ask you what, in your opinion, are the metrics that are important? What would you suggest?
Oh, I definitely would suggest to hand that over to Melanie because she's the metrics queen. That would be me like stumbling in like
I
the
love it.
for things that I would use. No, Melanie, that's you.
Well,
We're
Barbara,
going to close that one.
I think, Barbara, you just modeled something where I would actually pass that over to the business. And what I mean by that is it is not my job as L&D to decide what metric we should focus on to measure the impact. I got to have a conversation with the business on that.
I
Because the
love that,
metric
yeah.
I will focus on, really at the higher levels in terms of the impact the training creates, it all stems from the business need. Why in the first place are we doing this training? What's the reason behind it? The metric might be a reduction in customer complaints because we are doing a training on, let's say, training our customer service reps because we've seen an increase in customer complaints. But then on the other hand, it might be that we are focusing on a reduction in attrition because what has triggered the need for the training was that we saw an increase in attrition. So I think, Barbara, you pass it to me, and I would just say, as L&D, it's not that we pass it. We got to facilitate the dialogue
Yes.
right at the start. Why are we doing this program? What's the business need behind it? And, what's been going on in the business that tells us we need training, and that's where we actually have our metrics at the higher level.
Yeah.
So I would maybe say that's devil's advocate. Maybe the question should be, what metrics should we pay less attention to? And I would say maybe we should stop over focusing all on these, satisfaction scores and how many people complete the course and only how engaged they are, because there are metrics later on that are actually more relevant.
Yeah.
And stuff.
So again, aware of our time, I'm going to get us to close on each of you maybe sharing what would you recommend? If there's one thing you'd like a company to know about learning tools, strategies, what would you like them to know? I'm going to go with Barbara, Melanie, and then Megla. Barbara.
What I would recommend is to go for a blended learning journey, almost always. Always. Why? Because we do unfortunately know that virtual learning by itself, like just having LinkedIn Learning for your employees, that's not very satisfactory and not very useful. A blended learning journey would also help you to space out having a virtual session, a LinkedIn Learning or Raise Learning video in between, having an approach where you have even an in-presence training, afterwards peer learning. You need to have a good spacing. That's the one thing that I would recommend. The second thing, it's create more time for your people to learn, and even HR professionals, people and culture people. You can calculate how much it costs an organization if your people are not learning, if they're not getting the time. And if you just put on a rough one-pager calculation on how much it would cost an organization if an employee has 10 minutes more time a day to learn, how much money they could save. You can do that by estimating. If you can't do that, get in touch with me, because I've been doing that with several HR professionals already. Just estimating how much it would cost if they are not learning. And the third thing, I still would also think about how you can prepare employees, if you're using just virtual learning, micro learning, whatever platform it is, how you can prepare them and support them to create the skills they need to be a self-directed and self-motivated learner, because that's, in my opinion, is one of the biggest challenges also for me.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, Barbara. And just to our audience, if you have any questions, now is the time to put it in our chat box. If we don't get to them, we will respond later. Yes. Melanie.
Yeah, I'm going to go with two quick things because they're interconnected. So the first one is, I think the key thing I would say is if you really want to create trainings with impact and you want to see that transfer happens, make sure you start with clear goals. Clear goals with the business. Why are we even doing this training? And what is it really that we want our learners to do differently as a result of it? So-called transfer goals. I think still today we focus very often on learning goals, which again have their purpose in design, but for our learners, it's crucial that they actually know what's expected of them. What are they supposed to do differently? And if we don't know where we are going, there's also a big risk that we will pack the wrong stuff into the training design. So I think that's for me key, that we have very clear goals, that we like, why are we doing this? And the other one is actually, and that's based on what I said, what I see as a big challenge, scalability. I would actually also recommend maybe do less training, but do the trainings right. I hear so often people say, we would love to do transfer, but we don't have the resources, we don't have the time. Well, the thing is, maybe it's about really focusing on these mission critical training initiatives, but do them right. For those programs, we think about the transfer mechanisms that you can implement. So I think there maybe less training is actually more transfer.
Beautiful. Well said. Thank you for that, Melanie. Really, really good tip. Megla.
Yeah, I mean, agree completely with what Barbara and Melanie said. In order for any organization to have an embedded learning culture, making sure that their learning transfer is happening, the intentions are very important and they have to be set at the outset. But what perhaps I will add to this is not to forget, besides having beautiful online learning solutions and all these great AI tools, not to forget the value sometimes of interventions, like people interventions, coaching, mentoring. These programs are invaluable when it comes to supplementing the learning transfer. They complement it. It gives you a safe, a good safe space to discuss the application of this knowledge that has been acquired. I mean, we use this with Raise Learning, and we have this peer learning groups as well as individual intervention. So individual Raise Learning coach who helps an individual. And so, yeah, I would say not to lose sight of this. In fact, I mean, a research, I can mention a research by Conference Board last year, and it said over 50% of companies worldwide are now considering coaching as a key part of their learning and development initiatives. So it just goes to show the value. And of course, not forgetting leader can be the coach. So if you're limited with resources and cannot bring in an external coach, maybe get some leaders to be coaches and to be these learning coaches.
I mean, all of you, thank you so much. We are spot on time, and I'm quite thrilled that I manage time because I don't do that very well. But phenomenal. Thank you for these very, very valuable tips. I love that phrase, and I think we should all be working much more on it. So instead of a learning culture, it's the transfer culture. And I think that's something that we all need to push more. Thank you so much. Very valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful talk.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.